push cut. Hi y'all, welcome back to my shop. Today we're going to, we're not going to exactly go backwards in time, but if you recall I did this rough turned chestnut bowl back in April. Here it is September, 5 months later, and we're going to finish that process of this rinse and repeat. That is, we turned it once, we allowed it to dry and warp and turn oval, and now we're going to return it, turn it round. If you didn't get a chance to watch that video, you can catch the link here and go back and watch that. But this is turned a little bit over 8 inches long, and now that it's warped, it's about 3/8 of an inch longer in one direction than the other, so we've got to true it up. To some extent, my design that I can work with today is constricted by what I did back then, in how deep the bowl is, how big it is. The grain design on how I actually turned it between centers to get that grain orientation, and looking at this, I didn't do as nice a job as I'd like, because I'd like to have a more consistent pattern in the bottom that's even. That's not a big deal to some people, but it does enhance the look of the bowl if you can get that grain match. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to put this back on the lathe, and we're going to return this tenon to get it true. Now there's a couple of ways to do that. Basically, I'm going to put it up against this against the chuck. It's not going to fit real good, but I'm going to bring up the tailstock for support. Sometimes I use one of my vacuum chucks that's got kind of a soft edge, one that'll fit inside the bowl, and that gives it some security. But in this case, it doesn't work any better than that. Those chuck jaws for that initial shaping, because it has a tendency to want to rock because it's not completely flat. On some bowls, I find that if the shrinkage is great enough, the tangential versus the radial shrinkage, it's so uneven at the bottom, it's necessary to go ahead and chuck this up and flatten the bottom in order that you can put it against a chuck of some sort on the inside, so it doesn't rock, before you can true up the outside tenon and have it stable enough that you can refinish the outside and turn it. So let's get started. Now, one thing I want to mention, to make sure it's dry, I leave this outside most of the time, these bowls. Then I bring them inside when I get ready to turn. You can see I picked up just a little bit of mold here, and you can kill that with some rubbing alcohol. Probably should have done that earlier because it may have stained the wood somewhat. I'm going to true this up. I've got to be careful that I don't take off so much wood that I'll get this too small to fit in my chuck, because it is a substantial difference in one side or another. But in this case, it's just barely big enough. You can see these marks here. That's how much room I had between the jaws from the stain when it was green. Now that it'll be a little smaller, but I've got a little bit of room there to straighten that out. See, I had the original date of turning, April 8th, 2016. I also put a weight when I brought it inside the house about 10 days ago. I marked it 30.8 ounces. I measured it today, 10 days later, to see if it has lost any weight since then, and it hasn't. It's actually gained 1/10, so it's either gained a little more moisture, or there's just that little variation. It was so close it bounced up 1/10 of an ounce. So I know this is plenty dry. There's no rule of thumb that says wood dries 1 inch per year plus a year, but that's for long planks. And as we know, the wood does most of the drying outside of the end grain. In this case, the end grain was only 7/8 of an inch thick. So I can't tell you exactly how long it's going to take for you to dry a bowl in your area. It really varies based on the wood and the humidity and the thickness that you turn it. But most of the time I don't really pay a lot of attention to it, because you could see from here's an image of some of the bowl blanks that I have set aside. Once you start setting aside bowl blanks, and start accumulating some, you have the enjoyment of the process of turning those blanks, and in addition you wind up putting them aside. So some of these are several years old, so I'm never in a shortage to just grab a bowl blank, although I might have a problem with a specific size or certainly a species. But I've got a number of bowl blanks to choose from. So coming back to the truing up this, what I normally do is true this up with a detail gouge, which is that narrow, very shallow fluted gouge, so it's got a lot of steel bar here, a lot of support if I lean over the tool rest. The Titan chuck I'm using has a 15-degree, I believe it's 15-degree dovetail, so we're just going to trim this back just a little bit and do a slight dovetail. Making a little wobble sound inside that, against those chuck jaws, so let's just ease this up. Now I've got to screw up this face as well. It is essential that you true up this face because a lot of that mechanical hold is based on the jaw sitting flat against here and not having a gap. If you get a gap on one side, you're going to have an opportunity to pick up some vibration. So I've cleaned that up. It looks like I've got a nice dovetail. Now I'm just going to leave that, and I'm going to go ahead and turn the outside of the bowl, and then we'll reverse it to turn the inside. Okay, I've just taken time to refreshen the grind on my bowl gouge. This is a somewhat traditional grind because it has a U flute, so I can't sweep it back, and it's at about 55 degrees. Nothing special about it. Whatever grind works for you. We'll turn the speed up to about 1,000. Just going to use the push cut. It's a fairly coarse wood. I'm not getting any tear out, and it's getting a little bounce. I'm going to take one more pass to see if I can't get a little bit cleaner. Again, going as slow as I can. Okay, and I'm looking at the angle here to make sure I've got a nice smooth flowing curve, and that's pretty good. I think to smooth it out a little bit more before I resort to sanding is I'm going to go ahead and do some shear scraping. There's two approaches to shear scraping. The first one is generally a 5/8 inch bowl gouge with a very swept back wing that you can use, and you drop the handle, and that usually means you have to drop the tool rest, and you're going to have this drop the handle so maybe at a 45-degree angle. You're going to contact it with the inside of the bottom edge, and the top edge is not going to touch the wood. Excuse me. If it does, it's not going to make any difference. It's not going to hurt anything. It's just not going to scrape it. And you're just going to move very slowly and take the nicest, finest cut. You'll notice when I get about here, though, I've got to come up on it because the tool rest is in the way. So let me see if I can adjust this tool rest a little bit better. A little bit lower. So I can come all the way around here with one sweep, and that'll just about do it. Light pressure, just floating this over the edge here. Just floating it over the edge. As you can see, the very fine shavings I'm getting. Very fine shavings. And that has cleaned it up quite a bit. I think won't have any problem with probably start with about 120 grit to clean that up. Now, the other approach scraper I use sometimes, you might have seen this before, it's from an old Harbor Freight 1-inch skew where I've slightly rounded this, and it's as a scraper you can see it's got probably 80 degree 75, 80 degree bevel, and this works the same way. You can control the angle a little bit differently to get the best cut with that burr. One of the advantages of this one is just so much faster and easier to sharpen than the bowl gouge. I just lay it on the tool rest and quickly hit it lick. So let me show you how that works. And there we go. I may have shown this to you before, but I've forgotten. I use a Harbor Freight angled keyless. It's called a close quarter drill. Fairly inexpensive, and it's worked very well for me. It's got the air intake down here by the handle, so it doesn't suck up dust as if it was around here. I've made these mandrels using a 1/4 20 bolts. So and then I use a coupler, 1/4-inch coarse rod coupler to fit in here. So I can just spin these on, and I've got a mandrel for every grit. So rather than taking the grit off and tearing the back of the paper, I find it easier just to swap mandrels. And first thing I'm going to do is, of course, get rid of this tool rest, so that won't interfere. I'm going to turn on the dust collector, and then I'm just going to come on the outside, sanding in this lower 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock quadrant. Slow the speed of the lathe down. And the bowl is coming toward me. I have this going in the other direction, so that minimizes the difference and makes for a much smoother sand. Notice I have this braced on my turning muscle, so similar to using a bowl gouge, I can use my body and not rely on my hands. Keep it moving. I think the key thing to sanding is that those first couple of grits, you need to make sure you absolutely have removed all the tool marks. Otherwise, you're going to have to come back and resand starting with a lower grit. So you really have to work on those tool marks, and sometimes you can't always see them. It pays to have a harsh raking light so you can pick them up. But what also helps is sometimes a liquid, and it could be mineral spirits, it could be sanding sealer, it could be shellac, or in this case it could be a little boiled linseed oil. Since I'm going to finish this with an oil finish, this is not going to interfere with it. And by rubbing it on those areas, it'll usually tell you, what the scratches look like at a low level before you go to a higher. This boiled linseed oil also keeps some of that fine sanding dust down when you go to a finer grit. You keep it on here. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the next grit. I'm going to start with you don't want to go up more than 50%. In other words, 60. You shouldn't go higher than 180. But in this case, I like to go sometimes to 150. before I go to 180, just to make sure I get an extra grit on there dealing with those tool marks at a higher grit. One downside of using something like boiled linseed oil is it can load your paper, but you could do some cleanup with one of these crepe bars. At this point in time, when you do get it down to the final sanding, if I do any texturing or put any beads, this is when I would do it because it's running perfectly true. Once I turn it around on a chuck, I don't like working on the back side because it's more awkward for me. But also it's probably going to lose some of its concentricity, and I would have to take it down and sand it again. So this is when I would do any type of embellishment on the outside of the bowl before I call this finished and turn it around. I like this wood. I like the way it looks. I don't think I'm going to bother with any type of beading or ornamentation on it.